That's the wrong tab. I don't know how anybody listens to this music and doesn't get at least a little bit more hype. That's why most of the time it's sort of the last song that I play on my starting screen. And partially that, and partially because I figured out a month or two ago that if I always play the same song on my starting screen, then over time I get better and better at knowing exactly how long the starting screen has been going without even thinking about it. Um, Depending on where it is in that one particular song. The days I don't play that as my starting screen song, it's just because it feels like a lie. Those are the days that I'm like either not feeling the greatest, or I'm just really tired, or like can't quite summon that much hype. So it kind of feels like a lie. Those are the days I play other songs. Still upbeat and peppy, just not quite as like, yeah, you know, because this is a whole mood. Oh shit. Okay, we've got an ad starting just a minute. I'm not going to snooze it because I'm going to end up using all my snoozes just to keep it from playing during Q&A. So instead, an hour? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to run a 3-minute ad, and it's going to disable it for a whole hour. Sorry about the length of the ad, but at least it should prevent anybody from either being interrupted or coming in and having to sit through ads before they get to even join in the conversation. So don't worry, you're not missing anything. I'm waiting. Mars is prepared. Sun says, have you ever... I assume it's world built? Oh, wait. Ad stuff. Oh, my God. Cat, you just scared the shit out of me and probably deafened everybody in chat. For anybody who actually heard that, I apologize. My cat discovered that I brought the rest of the jar of peanuts up, accidentally left it on his table, and he very firmly reclaimed it for himself. Isn't that right? Yeah, let's go ahead and close the door while you're up here. Not to be mean, but it's easier than chasing you through the house later. You see you have dinner? Yeah, you've seen your dinner. Hi. You say hi to chat. There we go. Oh, yeah, and by the way, I should have been mentioning, or I should put a timer is what I should do. I added an extension for closed captions. If anybody needs or prefers them, I cannot guarantee their accuracy. All I can really guarantee is that all automatically generated closed captions suck to some extent. And they will probably suck less when I get back to my desktop because that microphone is better. Yeah. What? You gonna answer Q&A too? Well, that sounded like a yeah. Well, come join me then. Oh, so it wasn't the first time I've had the thought, but it was the first time that I've had like the full thought pulled, like thought all the way through, which is that I've pretty much all along intended to try and get some sort of cat cam going once I get moved into a new place. But it occurred to me while I was getting his food and stuff that whenever I do get a dedicated cat cam going, and it's not like just my webcam, I will totally make it so that if we don't have words on stream going, then the thing to watch part of the BRB screen, instead of just being paused gameplay, will totally be cat cam footage. um, okay. I saw a little bit of ghost. Me snacks or him snacks? I actually have both. So never mind. The answer is yes, regardless. Oh, and thank you guys, by the way, for spoiling the dragon pet rotten while I was taking care of the furball. Much appreciated. Okay. Oh, Mars has a question for Ghost. Ghost, question for you. Your thoughts on Fancy Feast? He likes wet food in general, as long as it's not pate. If it's like the pate texture, he can't stand it. And that's pretty much my fault, because when I first got him, I did what anxiety um, plus do it right type OCD always does when you're anxious about something. And I got pulled down a massive rabbit hole of research into cat diets and the best, most healthy possible thing you could feed a cat. And so he's actually been on basically a wet food diet only the whole time I've had him. I say only, he gets dry food as snacks. He'll get like a little scoop. Mostly because I can't. I winced before the noise happened because out of the corner of my eye, I saw the brush go to the edge of the bookcase and crash to the floor. I'm amazed there isn't like a dent in that floor yet from him pulling stuff off the bookcase. But anyway, when I first got him, I was trying to get the most. I couldn't afford fancy wet food, so I spent a ridiculous amount of time relative to what I was doing in the cat food aisle at Walmart, skimming the ingredients lists on all of the different kinds of Friskies, trying to find the healthiest version of them that I could, since I couldn't afford the fancier stuff. And technically speaking, the pate tends to be marginally more meat more meat and water toward the beginning of the ingredients list before it starts hitting things like, I don't know, rice starch and like, grains that cats don't need, and it's just like bullshit filler basically. So for a fair bit of time, I don't actually know how long, but at least a year or two after I first got him, he got every flavor of pate that Friskies had to offer, but it was all pate. And I think I wore him out of it so much that he won't even really eat it anymore. Like, they have to really work, and he has to really be hungry to break down and eat Friskies. Otherwise, he'll just leave it there and complain until you give him something else. He likes Fancy Feast. We have done Fancy Feast before. The lazy part of my brain likes Fancy Feast because they're smaller cans, which means that it's a full can per meal instead of a half a can, which means I could take the whole can, just go like that on the plate, and it's done. There's none of this scooping out wet cat food and then rinsing out the spoon and then putting the can in the fridge, and it's like a whole extra, minute tops of steps. This is not a big deal, but the lazy part of my brain still really would love to just be like, dump, trash, go. But Fancy Feast is expensive. Hell, everything is expensive. Yes, the filler grains. Oh, the reason I was checking Stream Manager was because I was going to say, if you guys have questions to add to Q&A stuff, if you would include either Tam or Tamaranth in the message. You don't actually have to tag me unless you just want to, because BTTV, yeah, for some reason the fact that the T's in the V rhyme always messes me up. Better Twitch TV, which I have, will highlight either version of my name in a message. That way I can copy and paste questions and see them without risking accidentally missing one. And then whenever you guys don't, like, as I get caught up with whatever you're currently asking, I'll work through the questions that got submitted early. Thank you guys, by the way, those of you who submitted questions ahead of time. Not gonna lie, it was actually quite helpful to the anxiety to know I would have something to answer if we ended up totally dead at this point. Just that little reassurance in my brain that was like, okay, well, I've got a good handful of things that I can just go on about for a while. And if nobody has anything in particular in chat to ask. I am going to try and I think, unless you guys have a preference otherwise, I'm going to prioritize, or unless I think of a reason to do otherwise, I'm going to try and prioritize questions that come in chat and then go back to the pre-submitted questions in between. I do promise, however, if you submitted a question in advance, it will get answered. I absolutely promise you that, even if it isn't like first thing or whatever. Why is that not? Oh, interesting. Okay, so apparently the colon does not work. I'm sitting here going, wait a second, I saw it. Mars said, Tam, why is it not lighting up? It's not lighting up because there's a colon. How often do you brush ghosts? Have you ever escaped the house? Ooh, I have answers for both of those. Bluebird, what was your first color issue or form? Not terribly far off from what it is now. Actually, hold on. I think you can even, if you're on desktop and you hover over the stream so that the side thingies pop out, or if you're on mobile, it's at the top of chat on the right hand side. There's a little box that'll have like a 3 plus or plus or something like that has the components in it. One of those will be Dragon Pets. And I think if you click on that, you can actually see the first form. Question. I am going to try to not get derailed on tangents so much that this takes the rest of the night up. So how often I brush Ghost used to be mostly just when he was shedding badly enough that he constantly had hairballs and he really needed it. Usually just like in the middle of the summer or something. Hey, Raven JPEG, welcome in. My brother are gonna do a May tournament summer called Streets of Sacrifice. Neat. Cool. But currently, because we're staying with my parents for the temporarily, and because my dad is allergic, I've actually been brushing him once to twice a day, because even though we're keeping him up here most of the day, and there's no like, this house has a major advantage in being as old as it is because it's been added onto, which means that the 2 bedrooms that are upstairs are both larger than average, because it used to just be a 2-bedroom house and the whole upstairs was basically split into 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So they're both basically master bedroom size. It's just neither one of them has their own bathroom. So that helps because the space is larger than it would ordinarily be. But it's also helpful because there's no air intake up here, only downstairs, which means as long as we keep the cat up here and brush him daily, there's a limited amount that the AC system and stuff can stir up cat fur and be spitting out in other rooms and making my poor dad miserable. But even still, even with keeping him up here, I still have to brush him basically daily, to keep his shedding down enough that he's not just like poofing clouds of cat fur everywhere he goes at this point. It is prime shedding season, to be fair. But I've been brushing him daily since we got here in February. So a lot is the answer to your question, Mars. As for Ghost ever getting out of the house, yes, he doesn't usually try. In fact, the one time he did, I'm pretty sure it was an accident. And the only reason he was still out there when I discovered what had happened was because he was because the way he got out basically closed behind him. So my parents' house is like 100 years old, or like 85 years old. And it has a basement that's actually more like a root cellar. So like you go down the steps in the kitchen, and it's basically like a concrete lined hole in the ground, and you can actually see like there's a space probably about this tall, where this is the floor of the house, or like the support for the floor of the house, and this is the ground. And you can actually see out into the yard as you're going down the stairs and you pass this space at eye level. And they have it blocked off on the outside to keep like rodents and things from getting into the basement. So the whole thing is basically blocked off, but then they have these there's these like metal grates that most of the time are sealed shut, but basically the way they're set up is he got into the basement, which he's been down there before. He loves exploring. We always try and keep him out because the space under the house is so small that we would never be able to get him out until he was ready to come out if we wanted to, and he would come out absolutely filthy because there isn't even any grass under there. It's just dirt. But it still gets runoff from all the, like if it's raining, then it still gets all the water runoff from the yard, so it gets all muddy under there and stuff. So we try and keep him out of there. But he has gotten down there a couple of times. Again, not typically a problem because it is sealed in, supposedly. The one time he got out, we could not figure out how he did it for quite some time. My mom couldn't believe it because she swore up and down there was absolutely no way for anything to like penetrate this like heavy duty. It's not even mesh. It's like a almost like a metal fence, sort of like slats, chicken wire sort of thing. But there are these like grates or vents in it that normally are like spring hinged and latched closed. Turns out the latch on one of them fell open or fell off or something, but it was unlatched. Nothing could get in, but if it was accidentally pushed on, it would open from the inside. So we're pretty sure what happened was Ghost was sniffing around the edge, bumped against it, noticed it opened, got curious, pushed his way out, and then couldn't get back in again because couldn't open it from the outside. So basically, I had been upstairs. This was several years ago. Yeah, this was several years ago, at least 3 years ago. Because we lived with my parents when I was in school. And so I was upstairs just working on homework or whatever. And it occurred to me that I hadn't seen him in a while, which is unusual because he's, in case you haven't noticed, he's pretty attached. He doesn't typically go too long wandering outside of whatever room I'm in. So it occurred to me that I hadn't seen him in a while. Figured he curled up and gone to sleep somewhere. So I went to go see where. And usually, if I've been doing other stuff and I actually go looking for him and I'm like calling his name, he'll immediately show up because he's like, oh, you're going to pay attention to me? Can we play? Can we play? Oh, like, yes, you summoned. Oh, you're not distracted and ignoring me anymore. It's very puppy-like. But so I basically wandered around and just like talking to him, waiting for him to wake up and be like, oh, she's paying attention to me. Um, except that he didn't emerge from wherever he was, I thought, curled up napping. And I walked a full lap of the whole house a couple of times. Like I checked every closet because he has gotten accidentally closed in a few of these closets before. Um, I checked the basement even. I went down there, I called, I left the door open just in case he was down there. Um, because oh, that's what it was. When I came downstairs, the basement door was like on the latch, but not actually closed. And I was like, oh shit. Don't tell me he got that. So I thought he was down there somewhere, just, having too much fun to bother coming. So I left the door open. I kept calling for him. I walked around the house to make sure he wasn't trapped in any other closet or something. Um, Absolutely sleepy. Absolutely. I'm almost done with the story, I promise. Um, so, so I thought he was down there somewhere, and you can't even see under the whole house because the house is too big. So I kept going down there and calling him, and I couldn't even hear the bell on his collar. And then the second or third time after I was down there, I was coming up out of the basement, and the way the kitchen is laid out, it's like if the basement door is here, the kitchen is here, and then there's like um, a bar window sort of thing, and then there's a sunroom which has a whole bunch of windows. Then there's the backyard and the part of the driveway. So basically, as I was coming up the basement stairs, I had a direct eye line sight straight out of the back window. Now, it hadn't occurred to me that he could have gotten outside because he and I were here by ourselves overnight. My parents had gone to the mountains for the weekend, and I knew I hadn't been out of the house. So all the doors were locked. There was literally no way he was accidentally slipping out a door somewhere. So I thought even if he was in the basement, there was no way in hell he could possibly be anywhere else. I wasn't looking. But as I came up the steps from the basement, my line of sight was pointed directly out the windows. There's this big pecan tree in the back, and I think part of that is why I noticed was because he was white fur against against the brown of the tree. Caught my attention. We do have a lot of stray cats in the neighborhood. One of them, who was around for a while, looked at first glance almost exactly identical to Ghost. In fact, um, you had to really look to be able to tell the difference between that cat. Scared all of us at one point or another, because at one point or another we all thought it was Ghost having gotten out. The cat had like this little tiny black tip on his tail, but if you couldn't see his tail, he was only slightly bigger than Ghost. Very much similar build, similar fur texture, and white everywhere except for that little black tip on the tail. Scared all of us at one point or another. So I come up the basement steps. I see flash of white on brown. I look. My first thought is, no, surely it's that other cat. It's got to be that other cat. There's no way he got out. The doors are freaking locked. He's in the basement somewhere. But I had been looking for him for long enough without any results that I was like kind of getting really, really confused and more than a little concerned at this point. So I went around the edge of the kitchen to the sunroom windows to take a closer look. And just about the same time, this little boy cat sat at the base of the tree, stood up, and I saw his tail, and there was no black tip. And I was like, and I like freaked out because we live on a major road, right? Now, pretty big front yard, but 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. The primary non-highway road between the city I live in and the town next door. Um, Big business areas on both ends, with just a little bit of residential in the middle. No stoplights for miles. So, of course, everybody's speeding that 45 miles an hour. Everybody's going like 50, 55. It's not great. And my cat hasn't been outside in years, like, not on his own. So I'm like, oh my God, he got 3 months of survival training around traffic, and then he's been inside for more than 3 years since then. Holy shit. Um, so what I did was his favorite toy was up on top of the fridge, waiting for playtime, because it wasn't the type you could just leave out unsupervised. So I grabbed his favorite toy and um and the bag of treats off the kitchen counter. And I went to the back door at the sunroom where I could see him. I opened the door and I latched it open so that if he got skittish or jumpy and ran, he at least could hopefully see that he could run back into the house. Because I figured if he was out there, then, and I didn't know how he got out there, chances were he didn't know how to get back in either. um, so I figured if I left the door open and he got um, startled or jump scared or something, maybe he'd be smart enough to run for the house instead of further away, like in the direction of a road. Well, he was very jumpy. He was clearly overwhelmed. But he was also kind of having, he's an adventurous sort, but he's a very cautious adventurous sort. He likes his adventures, but he does tend to get a little overwhelmed sometimes. Um, so he was clearly a little bit overstimulated. Like he was very jumpy. He did not come straight to me. He didn't want to like, he thought about coming for his toy. He wasn't 100% sure he was convinced he wanted to. He was having just enough fun, basically, but he wasn't sure he wanted to give in. But he was jumpy enough that even for me, if I move too quickly, like this cat hasn't been scared of me since the day we met. He walked in the front door of the store I was working at. And I picked him up and carried him home in my backpack. This cat has never been skittish of me for whatever reason. But I very quickly discovered if I didn't step very carefully on the gravel by the driveway, that just my footsteps would be enough to make him, like he was jumpy, which I discovered when I took a step and the gravel crunched and startled him and he ran around the side of the house toward the front. So I'm like almost holding my breath to stave off the panic at this point, right? Because, animals a lot of times can pick up on your vibe, and I needed to be able to think clearly. B, I needed to not be like, I needed to not risk freaking him out any more than he already was. So finally, so now we're out of sight of the kitchen door. We're within sight of the road, but we're like, I don't know how long it would be. Probably, oh gosh, I'm terrible. I'm not going to try and estimate the distance because I'm terrible at it, but generous sized front yard. Not huge, but solid sized for, living in a major area. Solid sized front yard and a little bit of house from this like death trap of cars, which is how I'm thinking of it at this point, right? He pauses, and I think that's where he got out, because he paused right by one of those vents into the basement. I think that's the one that he probably got out of, and he was pausing to see if maybe he could go back in and resume his basement exploration so he wouldn't have to come all the way in with me, but he could also not be outside anymore. Of course, that didn't work any better than I'm sure it did the first time he tried it. But after a little bit of coaxing, I think it was the toy that finally did it. Basically, I distracted him enough with this favorite toy that he just always wanted to play with and didn't always get to play with, which I think ended up being the key. It took a while. Like, he was not at all into it, but eventually I coaxed him enough with it that he was like, okay, sure, we'll play. That's cool. She's just standing there playing. She's not like trying to grab me or anything. Favorite toy, let's play. Which of course was when I grabbed him. He was still jumpy, so he instantly started squirming, and I'm like making a beeline for that open back door with this slippery squirming little ball of fur, like slipping and sliding in my arms, going, don't drop, don't drop, don't drop, don't drop. I got just inside the door and like kicked it off the latch so that it would close behind me just as he got out of my grip and like jumped to the floor. I was like, oh my God. And then I just like, I had a little bit of a mental breakdown there for like 10 minutes. And then I texted my mom and was like, I don't know what the hell you did to the basement, but the cat got out. And just kind of like decompressed. But yeah, that's the one and only time he's ever gotten outside unintentionally. He's been outside other times. He has a harness and a leash. When we were in Florida, we lived in a 400 square foot apartment, and the only way he would let me sleep some nights is if we went for a walk in the park first. Basically, give him enough stimulation that he'll go home and go to bed a couple times a week. Because otherwise he'll just get the zoomies and he'll be literally bouncing all over the place and he will like chew on me through the blankets and it's just like, it's ridiculous. But he's cute, aren't ya? I wish I had a cat cam because you have your very own bookcase shelf and I can't get it on camera. Would you come sit on this shelf instead? I don't. Okay. Preset question for Sleepy. Sorry for the lateness, Sleepy. You did submit quite a few, and I appreciate that so much. If you are going to bed soon, I can just go ahead and run through your pre-submitted ones if you want. I don't know. You said just one answered. You didn't specify if there was a specific one you wanted answered. Oh, but that's right. That's right. Two of, let's see, at least two of them? Three of them were pretty quick answers anyway. Maybe four? Perfect, most ideal sandwich. Mayonnaise on one side, just like plain white bread, or I guess like just normal whole wheat. Something simple and non-complicated or fancy. Mayo on one side, peanut butter on the other, sliced banana in between. Done. Favorite sandwich. Love that stuff. Don't have it as often as I would if it didn't require preparation and owning bananas. Yep. Mayo and peanut butter. It's basically a peanut butter banana sandwich, but with mayo on one side instead of peanut butter on both sides. It makes it less sticky and it's just easier to eat. And it feels a little less like a chore to eat it. I have to try it since I suggested Nutella and cheese the other day. If you like peanut butter and bananas, you absolutely should try it. I suppose you can put it on whatever bread you like. I'm just kind of picky about bread. Like, I like the cheap shit. Like Best Foods Mayo or Miracle Whip. They are different. I've only actually, my family never kept Miracle Whip around when I was growing up. So I kind of got in the habit of mayo. I've had Miracle Whip, but it's been a very long time. And I kind of always forget about it as a thing. In my defense, in Walmart, the mayo is at my eye level and the Miracle Whip is way down by the floor. So it's not like I get the visual reminder in my face when I go grocery shopping. It's also not like I buy mayo all that often. Oh, good. I was going to say, I don't understand how anybody could possibly not like peanut butter and bananas unless you're either like allergic to peanut butter or you really hate bananas, I guess. That would make sense, but that's the only thing I could think of that would cause anyone to not like peanut butter and bananas. But to me, it's like one of those things where maybe people use mayo and Miracle Whip in the same way, but since they are distinctly different, it's not an either or sort of thing. You know, it's they each serve their own purposes sort of thing. Or you like one, but you don't like the other. But not because you're seeing them as the same thing, just because because you're seeing them as different. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's favorite sandwich. I don't really have specific favorite road trip snacks. Pretty much anything sugary that I can nibble on in little bits. So like M&Ms, chips, basically whatever won't make a big mess in my car if I'm just like mindlessly nomming. Does Ghost have any fun outfits or accessories? Only one, which is why this is a short answer. At Christmas time, if you've ever seen those little velvety bows that they sell in like multi-packs at Walmart and they come in a whole bunch of different sizes, a lot of times they'll be like with the ornaments and they have it's just like a little red fake velvety bow with like a gold twist tie around the middle. I'll have to remember to stick a picture on the Discord. I gotta find the picture, but we have one of those that, and he has a Christmas themed collar. So he gets the collar a lot of times you can't see because in the wintertime he's got so much fur. Even in the summertime it can be hard to see his collar, but in the wintertime it gets so buried in the fur you can't hardly see it anyway. But what I'll do is I'll twist tie the bow to the collar opposite from the tags. So basically the tags weight down the front, which keeps the bow in the back where he can't like chew on it and stuff. And it's almost like a little reverse Christmas bow tie. It's freaking adorable. Or like a Christmas bow tie with tails, I guess, since bow ties are usually just the Miracle Whip is a no-go for me. Best. Oh wait, I read that already. Did I? Thanks so much for answering. No problem. Of course. You've never tried Muddy Buddies? That is a shame. You have a Christmas bow tie. Nice. I've seen collars with them like built in and stuff, but it was never one of those things where I could really justify paying the money for something that he was going to wear for maybe a week or two, a year. I don't remember how we actually ended up with this Christmas collar. Could have been that I just broke down an impulse bought one year. Yeah, I knew what you meant by Muddy Buddies. No, I have tried them. Oh, yeah, I have. I tried Mighty Buddies for the first time as a kid, and I was very rarely allowed to have them. My mom had a whole thing about extremely limited sugar. I was 16 before I had cotton candy for the first time, which I feel like is a little bit like mind-boggling for at least for most Americans. But always loved them. Always loved them. I even grab them as stream snacks from time to time. Musical instruments. I liked this question. It's also oddly. Hold on. Let me scroll up and make sure I didn't miss anything that I needed to be. Should. Oh, how Mars asked how bad the hairballs are. Um, he very rarely like hacks up hairballs. Usually that's what happens when they aren't digesting them enough to like just pass them all the way through. He usually does, but it usually either takes long enough um or he gets enough of them. I'm not entirely sure which. That a lot of times if he's shedding a lot, he'll lose his appetite a little bit. And he'll go kind of back and forth where he'll barely eat for a couple of days. Like he'll nibble and snack, but it'll take him like all day to get through like half or three-quarters of a can of cat food. No matter when I put it out. And that'll go for a couple of days, and then he'll either poop out a hairball, or he'll actually cough one up, and then he'll be hungry for a couple of days. And so a lot of times the brushing is just trying to help prevent him from having to work on digesting them, I guess. Um, so if you mean in terms of having to clean up vomited up hairballs, not actually as often as one would think if one saw how much he sheds. If that answers your question. Um, okay. Right. Looks like that was the last thing. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, cool. Oh, sorry, Mars. I missed question for Tam and Blooper. Which do you prefer, tacos or cookies? I think Blooper likes both equally, as far as I can tell. As for me, kind of depends on the mood I'm in. Um, if I'm craving sweets and like baked goods, because that's totally a thing that happens periodically, absolutely cookies. Otherwise, probably tacos because I have them less often. Probably. Um, okay, now I'm caught up on the live chat stuff, I think. Dang, would you stretch out juice with water too? You mean in terms of like sugar as a kid type stuff? Not usually. My mom would usually get like we didn't usually get the really sugary juices anyway. Like I don't remember if we usually kept juice around all that much. I mean, we sometimes did. We used to orange juice mostly though. Um and it was usually like the cheapest like all natural like whatever she could find that was mostly literally just orange juice without like extra added sugar and stuff. I always liked apple juice. To this day, apple juice still feels like kind of a indulging the childhood me somewhere in the back of my head a little bit. Um, to drink apple juice, I don't know why, um, but we never really like kept it around. I don't think she ever diluted it though. She just only got the stuff that she was like okay with us drinking. Um, we used to make popsicles out of the orange juice though. That was good. That was really good. I think we did it once or twice with apple juice too. Grape juice. We used to do it with grape juice too. It was like those little popsicle makers. You stick in the fridge and then you pop them out and the stick comes out with them and then you can just wash out and reuse it. Oh man. Awesome, awesome summer memories of popsicles in that house. Weirdly, I have more vivid memories of the summertime growing up than like anything else put together. Juice popsicles sound delicious. Oh, totally, totally. I didn't know that there were any other kind of popsicles for the longest time. Um, and even then, in my head, they were a totally different thing. Like Freezy Pops weren't popsicles; they were Freezy Pops. Like those ices, or not icy. It's like icy brand is the name brand, but like the tube ones that are stupid cheap, but also like just a tube of frozen sugar juice. I got through a extremely hot summer in Boston without air conditioning on those. Summer was an awesome time. You can stay out longer since it's warm. Yeah, and the house I grew up in was pretty far from like most everything developed at that point. I mean, it was solid 15 minutes to the nearest, literally anywhere you could buy food of any kind. Grocery store, gas station, literally anything. Um, and it was a full half hour into the town where my address technically was. I mean, it's a lot more built up now, but I mean, we had like almost a half an acre, so big backyard. Not a whole lot of other kids in the neighborhood. Um, there were like two families, one lived next door, but the youngest of all of those kids, like all four of them, was like still 3 years older than me. So me and my younger brother were very much just kind of our own playmates in this big old yard, and there was a nearby neighborhood swimming pool that mom would take us to sometimes in the summer, and other than that we'd make forts in the bushes in our own yard, and she'd order big piles of leaves that the lawn care guy raked up from other yards, and he would come in his big old truck, and he would drop them off in the backyard, and she'd leave it sitting there for a few days to kind of let them settle. Part of me wonders if she didn't do it just so that we could build forts in them before she went and used them in the garden. But just in terms of sensory stuff, even like, I don't know if anybody else would even get what I mean when I say this, but the smell of air conditioning, or I think it would be more accurate to say that it's the smell of air conditioning kicking on after not being used for several months. Except that the house I grew up in smelled like that all summer. The combination of that and the smell of sunscreen is like the most like quintessential summer sense, I guess, for me, if that makes sense. I don't know. That and juice popsicles and anyway. Oh, I was gonna answer your musical instrument question. That was a particularly interesting one. I like that one. Um, so the answer, dude, smells like olfactory senses are the strongest for memories. I think you're right. In fact, I want to say I maybe read that somewhere once or heard it somewhere, or my brain imagines that I did because it just makes sense. I agree though. um, and it's amazing to me because it's also, at least for me, it's the hardest type to bring to mind without actually re-experiencing it, right? Like if I try and think of that smell, for example, I can sort of bring it to mind, but what I'm really bringing to mind is more just the the memory is actually more the feeling of going from hot sunny backyard into nice icy cool house. It's not really the smell that I'm bringing to mind so much unless I actually smell it again. Whereas you can remember the sound of someone's voice, you can remember, you can, close your eyes and imagine someone's face in your mind if you have it memorized well enough. That sounded weird. I was trying to figure out how to make that sound less weird and I totally failed. Whatever. Um, but, and again, maybe it's just me, but maybe it's not. I can't really do that with smell. It just seems odd. Anyway. um, so do I play any musical instruments? Answer kind of depends on how you define play. I would say for right now, the answer would be categorically no. I, like modern day. I have in the past. I neither got good, I neither remember enough, nor did I get good enough to the point where it would like stick with me forever that I would still be comfortable claiming to play an instrument necessarily. That sounds like a little bit too competent, I guess, for my musical skills, current or former, but especially current. But I actually went through several. So my mom learned piano when she was growing up, and we got a, uh, sort of I guess technically it was an electric keyboard, but the kind that is its own thing, and then it has like a pop-up X-shaped stand, and you sit on the stand. We got one of those for Christmas from my grandmother when my brother and I were pretty little, and so my mom basically required us to learn at least a bit of piano for a number of years, that she taught us. My brother actually went on to take actual lessons. He was pretty good. I I had issues with the whole being required to practice thing, which like not like explicit issues, but I I disliked the requirement of having to practice enough that when I was told that I got to choose whether I kept going or not, I said nope. I kind of have regretted that off and on since then. Um, I have also had that keyboard in my possession and played it or like messed around on it some just on my own in the last like 10 years or so. Um, but given that I can still read basic basic sheet music I can read very slowly. It's very much like trying to read it's actually probably slower than trying to read a language I'm similarly familiar with. It's like trying to speak or form new sentences in a language that I'm super rusty in, like Spanish, for example. Um, and only the basics. Like I can tell you, well, and it goes for the sharps. It goes F and then C, and then I don't remember. It's a flat. Then I remember it's B first, and it's always like always B, and then I can like remember what all the bars are. I don't remember what any of the terminology is, which is why I'm stumbling over this explanation so badly. I know what dots mean and quarter notes versus half notes and that kind of stuff. But you start getting into like the real notation, the more I guess nuanced sort of like the stuff that tends to tell you more about how to play it, not just what to play. Does that make sense? Um, a lot of that stuff I never actually got as far as learning because it was more advanced than what I was at age 9 or 11 or whatever. So I did that. I played clarinet for a year in middle school. Um, in like it wasn't technically a school band. It was like I was homeschooled in middle school, so it was a local area, like Tri-City area band for homeschoolers who weren't getting band at school. Um, Played clarinet for a year. Would not even be able to identify a C on a clarinet these days. It is. I only played it for a year, and I'm pretty sure I have not touched one since. But I enjoyed it while it lasted. I don't remember why I stopped. I think I stopped because I went to high school. I think that must have been it. And then in high school, I expressed an interest in taking up. Um, I want to say I just barely touched on the most basic sort of crescendo, but I'm not sure I'd be able to identify one now. um, Reading music is such a cool skill. It is a pretty cool skill. It is a pretty cool skill. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, in high school, I expressed an interest in picking up some sort of music again. Um, I'm impressed clarinet players can even make a sound. So hard to get the reed to speak. It definitely takes a lot more breath control strength, I guess, than I was expecting when I first started it. But my grandfather, my mom's dad, played clarinet in a marching band for, oh gosh, many, many years. I don't remember what the story was behind that, but it was actually his clarinet. Um, I mean, all the quirky bits and the bumpers and things were all ancient and crumbling, but we basically got it repaired and touched up, and that was the clarinet I was using. So, and I never got to know him. He died right after I was born, so that was kind of neat. Also, it required less auditory awareness than playing the flute. and also less breath control. Like, I'm not sure I'd actually be able to do the clarinet these days. I'm not sure I'd have the uh, exhalatory strength for it. I don't know what term I'm looking for. Um, well, I mean, to be fair, it was well preserved. I mean, he had it in its own case, original case, and everything, and it probably didn't get brought out for at least, well, actually, when he died, he had lung cancer. So chances are it was probably 30, minimum 30 years that it didn't even come out of the case, would be my guess. I pass out every time I try to play the flute. I know very little about the flute, aside from it's pretty. When I expressed an interest in picking music up again in high school, my mom was thrilled because, unlike my brother, I did choose to stop doing piano, and I think she kind of always wanted me to get spend more time on music. And so what I really wanted to pick up was violin, but specifically um, with more of a focus on like the Irish fiddle style violin, because I've loved the sound, I loved music. I was actually a competitive Irish dancer for like a decade, so not only did I love the sound, but the sound was very, very familiar to me, right? Um, and I also had a couple of friends in high school who played fiddle. Um, I really wanted to learn, and I remember we rented a violin from somewhere, like a practice violin. Um, Found a teacher, like it was a one-on-one teacher sort of thing. I mean, I don't know if anybody actually does non-school related music lessons any other way, but um, very nice guy. Um, might have been. I think we actually found him through my high school friends who played, possibly. I don't remember. Um, but we rented a violin instead of buying one, which is smart because it was sort of a let's see if this, give it a shot, see if it lasts. Musical instruments are expensive, you know. Um, I enjoyed it, but basically, so I don't know if you've heard, for anybody who hasn't heard me explain this before, I actually have pretty major auditory processing disorder, which breaks down into like effects on like 6 different actual like functions. But the TLDR is that my ears are super sensitive. Like I have really good hearing, insanely good, um, arguably too good. But my brain is like half deaf. um, but part of that is difficulty with subtle differences in like tone, pitch. I'm not even sure I know the difference between those two things. Um, like I can tell whether a sound is going up or going down, but if you gave me two sounds and said, okay, this is sound A, and then I had to, wait 30 seconds or something, and then you played sound B, most of the time I would not be able to tell you which one was higher or lower than the other one, unless it was really dramatic. Or they were like immediately one after the other. And I would never be able to identify either of those notes again. I would only understand them in immediate relation to each other, if that makes sense, which makes it really hard to learn an instrument like violin, where not only do you have similar like method of controlling notes and octaves like on a guitar, but you don't have frets marked. Like it's generally done by ear and practice. So basically you practice by ear, you learn, okay, this note sounds like this note sounds like this. This is what it sounds when I actually hit this note. This is what it sounds like when I'm slightly off. And then you practice hitting it until you don't have to think about it anymore. The problem is I can't tell when I'm hitting it or when I'm not. So And um, there's every reason to believe that I would never be able to actually remember it. So basically, I'd be playing on a baby training violin with like stickers on exactly the spots to put my fingers, and I'd have to get somebody else to tune it every time. And it's like, okay, so if I have to be handheld through the process of like the really basic process of even just getting ready to play the instrument, do I really like, is it worth putting in the time and the practice to actually learn the thing? Or do I want to go learn something that I can actually play by myself someday? um, I just did a quick Google search on it. Never heard of it before. It's sometimes called central auditory processing disorder too, if that helps. They tend to be used interchangeably. Thank you for sharing. No problem. Um, it's one of those things that most people never notice because basically from like, I didn't actually get tested for it until I was in high school. Um, so I grew up basically compensating or like with my brain learning to compensate. So I can actually lip read to some extent, certainly better than anybody else who didn't have the assist of not being able to hear the words. Like usually when people learn to lip read, their brains are their brains automatically put in the effort required to like and automatically do the processing and things to learn how to do that because they're lacking the other sensory input, right? So it's really, really hard for hearing people to learn things like lip reading because they don't have the same sensory deprivation motivating their brain, essentially. Um, I can't lip read on its own, but I can lip read pretty much any vowel and like 3 to 4 groups of consonants. Um, basically enough to supplement what I can hear. Um, so, so growing up, my mom always thought that I was just ADD because I was constantly distracted. Just because like the world was a noisy, chaotic place, and my brain didn't know how to make sense of that. So I was just kind of off in my own world until it was like, "Hey, focus, focus, focus," and I was like, say what now? Okay, I'm focusing. What? Super interesting as someone who went to college, become a music educator. Oh, that's awesome. I can understand how that would be a lot more work than you were initially bargained for. Yeah, in a way, but also in a way not. I mean, objectively, yes. Subjectively, I can't really tell because I grew up with it, right? So it's actually been more of a really interesting process of things. I say it's been, I mean, I was diagnosed like over a decade ago at this point, but for years and years after I actually got tested, it was this really interesting process of new things occurring to me that was like, oh, I wonder if that's why this or that, or I never knew that was weird, or I never knew that that didn't apply to everybody because I also grew up homeschooled because my mom figured I was ADD or something similar. And also, I started teaching myself to read before I was even talking very well, partially because when you learn language, that's how you learn to talk, right? So my language learning is processing things weird. So it took me longer to learn to talk. um, I tended to stutter or mispronounce stuff more. Um, but I started trying to teach myself to read at like age 2. So my mom was like, "Okay, she's gonna be bored as hell if I send her to public school because she's already gonna be reading like second grade books by the time she's like 5 at this rate." um, so she homeschooled me until high school, and then I went to like little bitty private school, which was good for a lot of reasons, um, but because I was homeschooled, I also didn't have a whole lot of contrast with like other kids my age in terms of what of my experiences were normal versus unusual until I was an adult later, and it was like and learning more and more about the auditory processing stuff, and I was like, maybe not everybody does this or that. Which is just a weird feeling to have at the age of 25, right? It's like, never occurred to me to even wonder if that was normal before. Apparently it's not. Hi, you want to come say hi to chat? I'm sure music teachers need to think about accommodations for students with auditory disorders. I'm curious as to what. Probably not much yet. It's only the last, I'm going to pull a number out of my ass. I'm going to say 20 years, 15, 20 years or so, that it's even been recognized as an actual like standalone diagnosis. It used to be a sub-diagnosis of hearing loss, because a lot of times people with hearing loss will start to have processing problems because of the hearing loss. So it's actually fairly recent to be recognized as a standalone thing of its own. And it tends to present enough like ADD in children that my audiologist, at least, um, said she's pretty sure that some surprisingly significant portion of the kids diagnosed with ADD actually have auditory processing issues, or maybe some other kind of processing, but probably auditory, where they just seem to be ADD, but nobody knows how to recognize it as a thing yet. Hell, most of the parents out there don't know it is a thing yet. You know, almost nobody's ever heard of it, to the point where when I got diagnosed, there was, I don't even remember what sort of place it was. I have this memory of going with my mom to a group somewhere, and it was like a teaching lecture, like one of those, the sort of thing that they have at like a library or something, where it's a lecture for the benefit of the community. It's free to show up, whatever. But it was specifically for parents who had kids who'd recently been diagnosed with auditory processing. And I remember afterwards, I ended up in the position of being requested to do a whole lot more socializing than I was anticipating, because, as it turns out, kids are only just starting to be diagnosed. So having a 20-year-old who grew up with it and now had the diagnosis and could relate the two things, like, everybody wanted to ask me questions about growing up and stuff, because they're trying to understand their own kids, right? Which I thought was awesome, but at the same time was kind of startling, because it's like, weird, right? Yeah, you realize your normal may not be everyone else's normal. Yeah. If I was in that position as music teacher, I think I'd focus on having, good luck, having the students sing. Maybe they could feel they could probably feel the intervals. They'd be lucky to be able to hit the notes though. Depending on, now there are different areas that it can affect, and I have to remind myself not to make assumptions, because when I had my test done, I tested badly in all of the sub areas, and my audiologist said that in 18 years of specializing in auditory processing disorder, she had only ever once seen test results as bad as mine, and they were in a textbook. Overachiever without even trying. So I have to remind myself that not everybody who has it necessarily has all the parts of it, but it'll be like, I'm not even sure if I remember all the like subcategories. I could rattle them off at one point, but there's the difficulty distinguishing tone that I mentioned before. Oh dang, sorry for laughing, but you're being funny. No, please laugh, please laugh. I want it to be entertaining. I don't want to be like, I don't know. I'd much rather, like, you know, get to know you guys in a funny, entertaining way, rather than like super intense and everything's heavy, and like, I don't take myself that seriously, honestly. Feel like it's better that way. And honestly, I don't expect anyone else to take me that seriously either. But at least not in terms of like super heavy salinity stuff. I mean, some of this shit's funny. Like, for example, I was joking with my audiologist. Basically, in order to qualify for the auditory processing test, I had to get tested. I had to get my hearing tested first, basically to prove that it wasn't hearing loss, so the insurance would pay for auditory processing testing. And I joked with my audiologist that I failed my hearing test because I lost. If for anyone who's not familiar with how they do hearing tests, they put you in this soundproof box with these proofing headphones on, and it's really weird. You don't realize how much background noise there is in the world until they put you in this little box, or little like room booth thing, and they give you these headphones, and they play like a beep sound. Usually, if I remember correctly, I think it's 1 ear at a time. Usually, and it'll get softer and softer and softer, and basically you have at like steady intervals, and you have to tell them when you stop hearing it. Right. So I joked with my audiologist after that I failed the hearing test because I lost I lost the beep. It got really quiet, and then I got drowned out by my own heartbeat. So I was sitting there trying to hear the beat past my own heartbeat, but my stupid heart wouldn't even let me, like, didn't even have the decency to shut up long enough for me to find the damn beep again. Which of course is not failing a hearing test, right? That's like, it's called hyperacusis. It's extra good hearing. Um, to the point where when I listen to music at what would be in moderate to loud volume for most people, like what you would think of if you don't have any hearing loss, and you think of like low key blasting music in the car, for example. Um, that volume I totally can get up to and will, especially if I'm on the highway and there's other background noise around. But I always start way lower and gradually increase it. I can't start it off loud. Um, it's actually painful. Um, hey, Monkey Martian, welcome in. Oh gosh, shut up, heart. What the fuck? I didn't even know APD was a thing until now. I'm looking through the symptoms online. Sounds like what I struggled with all the way through school. Oh, really? Huh. Might be worth seeing an audiologist about it. I'm sure there are more people who, or more audiologists available who know what it is and what to look for and how to help you if you do have it now than there were 20 years ago. Or, hold on, not 20 years ago. How old was I? It's like 13, 14 years ago. That's when I got tested. Um, yeah, for sure. Because even to me, sometimes it can seem like ADD, where, like, I used to joke that it was the most convenient thing in the world in terms of when I was driving a car that only had the option of listening to the radio, because as obnoxious as radio songs are, all I had to do was stop trying to understand the lyrics, and they all just turned into this whole big mush of sound that still sounded like music, but I didn't have to understand any of the words if I didn't want to. So songs with really obnoxious lyrics, I could still listen to and enjoy the beat because I could just turn off the part of my brain that paid attention to what the words were. And as soon as I stopped paying attention to it, they stopped being words. um, but so subcategories are differences in tone, um, filtering background noise. So like the all those things that you don't realize you hear until you go into that soundproof booth are things that, depending on where they are and how loud they are and which ear they're coming in and what direction they're coming from, are all things that my brain has excessive difficulty or even just straight up can't filter out. So like, for example, part of the reason I don't use headphones is because I have, like, the desktop audio in Streamlabs is hooked up to a set of speakers plugged into the laptop, but the speakers have their own dial on them, which means I can set the desktop audio to what you guys tell me and I hear later on the VOD is a good level for the background music, which I clearly forgot to turn on hours ago. Sorry about that. So I can set it to what I have learned is a good background level for you guys, and then I turn it down even farther on my end. But I can do that because it has a separate knob, so I can adjust the volume on my end, and that's the only way that, like, if I had it at the level that it plays on stream, even though it's still background music, it's louder enough, it's present enough that I would never make it through a 6-hour stream like still making sentences, because it takes too much brain power basically for my brain to filter my own voice and sounds that matter out from the background music at that volume. Like, it has to be almost inaudible um, for me to just be able to like sit here and chat without having to add extra brain power into thinking through getting the words from my brain out my mouth, despite the distraction of the noise, because I can't filter it. If that makes sense. I was trying play button. I never claimed I could multitask regardless of processing. So tone, filtering out background noise. There were specific terms for these. There are two different like language related ones, right? So there's one where unless you're putting in, I'm going to call it processing effort. Unless you're putting in the processing effort, words don't sound like words. They just sound like sounds, or like non-English words, where you can clearly tell that the person's talking and they're clearly speaking something that's supposed to make sense, but it's just coming out as gibberish. And then there's a separate function, which is hearing the words, understanding the actual words, but having trouble deriving actual meaning from that, right? I used to have a pretty good example, but basically you get the actual words, you understand their words, they sound like normal English words, but it's almost like your brain's so busy processing the words that it forgets to figure out what the sentence means. Which in turn can translate to basically all the same things coming out again, right? Because we learn to speak by listening. What's four? I'm forgetting something. I don't remember what it is, but I'll let you know if it comes to me. Monkey Martian. Do you prefer monkey or Martian? Only because I tend to shorten everybody's names, and I try to remember to ask how they prefer their name shortened, or if that's okay before I do it. I don't always succeed, but I try. So yes, do you mind? And if not, do you have a preference one way or the other? I've done hearing tests before. I do have some hearing loss as well, with lower frequencies mainly. And I find it impossible to understand people when there's noticeable background noise. Yeah, and a lot of that can come just naturally with hearing loss. So even then, like if you already know that you have a little bit of hearing loss, that could be something where you have the auditory processing even straight from that, even without it on its own, and it's basically the exact same thing. Sleepy says, hold on, I lost my place. Oh dang, I have low audiation, which is just like, I can't hear sounds in my head. That's, oh neat, I never knew there was a word for that. Probably should have, because there's a word for just about everything. See, we all get to learn things on stream. I learned something new today. I like it. I didn't notice until I went to music school, and everyone else could remember sounds significantly better than me. Yeah, remembering sound tends to be more of an issue with auditory processing too, except that I just find my streamers call me monkey. Monkey it is then. In music school, they'd be like, just sing it in your head, and I'd be like, how? The funny thing was, I'm not entirely sure how it worked, but especially in high school. Now, my voice is, either my voice has changed or just I don't practice as much or unintentionally practice as much anymore, and so I've lost it a little bit. But when I was in high school, it was like almost, it was like my low-key party trick that wasn't really a party trick because it wouldn't be worth anything as a party trick, but it was like just this random neat thing that I could do that apparently nobody else could, which was that when a song would come on the radio, within like physical reason, I could sing along with just about any mid-range artist and blend my voice to the point where I could be singing at a normal speaking volume, but I could match my voice to the singers. Now, I can't even sing Happy Birthday like half in pitch without somebody to match. Like, it's really bad. I can't hum the most basic, like, what's a good example? Like a really common jingle that you hear on like a commercial all the time or something like that. Of course, like Nationwide, for example. Nationwide is on your site, right? I can't, like, I can't remember accurately exactly where to start, although I can remember exactly how the notes relate to each other. And B, even when I can hear it clearly in my head, audiation, I believe, which mine I don't think is actually too bad. It's not very precise, but it's as precise as what I hear, at least. I mean, but if I tried to even just like hum the whole Nationwide is on your side thing, unless I was humming or singing the, you know, couple of words along with somebody else who was doing it at the same time, even hearing it perfectly in my head, it never comes out of my mouth that way because of the whole brain to speaking muscles translation problem. So I might hear it mostly right. I'll remember it a little less accurately, but close enough that I can't tell the difference. But I can't reproduce it for the fucking life of me, even if I can remember. But if you give me somebody who's singing something and they're even remotely near my range, and obviously I know the song, then I can sing along with them without being half bad. And I hit, assuming I know the song, I can hit all the notes. Like I pretty much every phone I've ever had has a sing-along playlist on it of artists specifically that of like songs and stuff that I really enjoy singing along with. So I'm going to sing along in the car because literally singing along with is the only time I can do it. And if it's somebody who's confident enough to actually be singing, then they're loud enough that I can sing along with them. And it doesn't really matter. Like, my brother and I went through this whole thing. There was a brief period of time where we were both living with my parents at the same time. I was in school. He was getting ready to move out, but was still here. And we used to get distracted with these random conversations about super spontaneous shit, like way late into the night. And one night turned into a "have you heard this song" sort of music exchange, followed by somehow that devolved distractedly into us trying to find songs we could both sing along with, because he can actually sing like pretty decently for somebody who's never had any training whatsoever and hasn't taken an instrument since elementary school or middle school, I guess, was the last time he took piano lessons. He's never had singing lessons. He's never had any other music lessons, but he can actually hold a tune reasonably decently. Like, he's not bad. Is he like mind-bogglingly spectacular? Not as far as I could tell from like observing the people around us. I'm not sure I would know, but he's clearly not bad. You know, he can sing a few notes here and there, or he can sing along with the karaoke version of something without utterly embarrassing himself. And if he's singing, I can sing along with him because I can match him. But give me the exact same song, have him, so take a song we both have perfectly memorized, right? Get to the one line that I have just absolutely ground into my brain. Have us both start it, and then have him stop. My notes will change immediately, and I will go flat or sharp or something. But my ability to hit whatever it is, whatever note has to come next, no matter how well I know the song, the second his voice goes away, I can't sing it for shit anymore. Even like halfway through a sentence, it's the weirdest thing. If I ever sung karaoke, I'd have to have the song playing in headphones in my ears. But even then, it's kind of hard because it almost has to be. Headphones are hard because then I have to be able to hear myself too in order to match myself. Because the only way I can match it is based on hearing what's coming out of my mouth. Because what I hear in my head is never accurate to what it comes out of my mouth. Making you rethink things. Getting ideas on how to make accessible music education for students with ADD or other similar disorders. Thank you very much. Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. I had a music elective my senior year of high school. And like I said, I went to this little bitty private high school. My entire graduating class was 22 people big. 22, including me. And two of them were friends of mine who actually took extra classes in order to graduate in 3 years. So most of my high school career was only 20 of us. And my senior year, almost the whole music class, or the music elective class, almost the whole class was seniors, and a lot of it were people who were already at least friends or casual, like, friendly acquaintances with each other. So the music teacher ended up teaching everyone except like one or two of the people who were in the music class a song to do at graduation, right? I ended up playing percussion and singing backup vocals, which I loved because I have literally never sung like a single bloody word in front of anybody in my life by myself, or at least not like singing along with the radio in the car notwithstanding. Hey, Monkey, thank you for following. Appreciate that. Welcome in. Or glad you said you should stay and hang out. Percussion, yep. The way we did it, so there were two songs that we actually played at the end of that year. I don't think they were both actually at graduation, but there was the senior song, which was just seniors, and it was like, I was on like a handheld drum. We didn't have like, it was a very, I mean, there weren't a lot of us, right? And most of us had 1 year's worth of music elective as a class. Now, there were a couple of friends who played the fiddle, or one of my friends who happened to be in the group had been playing bass guitar since middle school. But it was basically half a dozen, maybe, actually probably not even that many, probably 4 or 5 like actual musicians with any sort of like real training in an actual instrument, and then a whole bunch of us playing a whole variety of generally percussion-ish sort of shit that we picked up in a class from an elective we took once a week for half a year. But that was just like a handheld drum sort of thing, because like I said, I was super nervous because I was not at all sure about backup vocals, because I was the only backup vocalist, like, and I was backup vocals for a guy. No, it was a friend of mine. It was sort of the same thing as my brother, where it was like he was in the range where I could match him, and it worked because you could tell that there were backup vocals. If it had been like a female singer who I could, I'm gonna call it blending with rather than matching. You wouldn't have even been able to tell I was singing, except my mouth would be moving, which was how it always was with female singers in the car, right? But you get a guy singing, you can tell that obviously it's not two guys' voices. So the main our primary singer was a guy, a friend of mine. But I was super nervous about it. So basically, the music teacher relented on and took pity on poor little, very, very socially anxious me, who was doing not one but two musical performances, an area in which I had basically no training whatsoever, aside from, you know, an hour a week for 4 months. And doing two actual performances in front of actual people of 2 different songs. She took pity on me, and she gave me a single hand drum that I had like a 2-beat rhythm to play the whole song, except for when I did backup vocals during the chorus. And then I got to stop worrying about the hand drum for the chorus, focus on the vocals, and then just go back to my little 2-beat rhythm. Most of the time I was just sitting there. It's the best and most fun orchestration. It was really fun. It really was. And the music teacher was very much the sort to make it fun and encourage that sort of like sit around and play with it a little bit sort of feel, right? Which is how I think that's how I ended up being backup vocal to begin with, because that's not something I ever would have volunteered myself for. Were you back up singing the same notes as him? Mostly. There was have you ever heard the song Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root? Sort of pretty sure it's been in at least 1 or 2 soundtracks at some point. It's very much a laid back, chill, sort of hippie sounding vibe. Like, it sounds like it would belong in a soundtrack as like background to, you know, a view of somebody driving across the country in a hippie van or something like that. Very chill. But there's one place in the chorus where, and it's a male vocalist, so that part fit what we had to work with. But there's one part in the chorus where the vocals drop lower than I can actually match. But they also drop low enough that I can go 1 octave up. And I can still match, as long as it's not for too long and as long as he's singing loudly enough. So basically, I was sat right next to him, and that's why that's why I didn't have, yeah. Why, maybe? Was it a nice each? That wouldn't really surprise me. Bruh, I know what it's called now. Wait, that's that song? I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, basically, as long as I was sitting next to him and I wasn't having to focus on drums and singing at the same time, I could go like, you know, half a dozen words or so, exactly 1 octave up, but still singing the same notes, I think. Like I said, I haven't been trained, and I'm kind of just hoping that it was in key. Obviously, it was this, like, it wasn't exactly an acoustically ideal place that we were performing either. Like, it wasn't bad. It was designed for, it was actually a Quaker meeting house. So it was sort of like a little bitty, itty bitty church. So not bad acoustically, but not designed for acoustic performances or musical. That's what I was looking for. Not as designed to have acoustics for musical performances. I've watched Ice Age like 50 times. I recognize that song anywhere. Nice. Yeah, that was our senior song. Anyway. Oh, so to back up briefly and then move on, because I feel bad that I have not gotten to more questions by now. So to back up briefly, so I took violin lessons for like a month. My teacher basically explained to my mom why it was going to be an ongoing problem, because it wasn't exactly like, it wasn't like we could really expect that any amount of practice would actually make it sustainably better in the long term, because I wouldn't be able to tell if it was any different. So there would always have to be somebody basically checking behind me to make sure the freaking thing was in tune. Or, you know, I could use an electric tuner, but then if I ever start drifting out of practice and I'm hitting notes wrong, I won't be able to tell, but other people might. Or other people might be able to tell that it just doesn't sound good. Or whatever. But I won't be able to tell if I'm gradually starting to shift where I'm hitting the notes or whatever, because I can't tell the difference. So what I ended up doing was I ended up switching. My dad plays classical guitar, or a little bit. He hasn't played it in many, many years, but he has a guitar that he bought when he was in his 20s that I have always loved, that I managed to talk him out of selling because my dad doesn't have a single sentimental bone in his damn body. And I have all of them. And I went, but that thing is so special. You bought it on Hawaii, and now it's like this really big, nice name brand. Like, these things are expensive now. Plus, it's from when he was in his 20s, and he's in his mid-60s now, and it's still, like, in the family and in good condition. And, I mean, it needs strings every time anybody wants to do anything with it, because it just taken out of the case not very often, and the case itself is kind of falling apart a little bit, but it is a gorgeous, gorgeous instrument. So I talked him out of selling it, and I ended up taking some guitar lessons for a while, generally classical style, although my teacher was nice enough to see that I was interested in, we told her about the whole fiddle misadventure, and bless her heart, she went out of her way to find tunes with sort of an Irish sound to teach me on the guitar, even though she was teaching me classical guitar. It was awesome. I never really built up like the muscle memory. It was always a very much pick my way through it, and even then, I never really got any good at reading music. She and I were more focused on actually like building the muscle memory. So I don't remember if we actually talked about it with my parents or if it was just something we decided between the two of us, but we settled pretty early on that I didn't have any interest in slogging my way through sheet music when guitar tab is so simple and makes so much sense the way it's laid out, at least to me, to read. And she was like, okay, cool, that's fine. If that's the way you want to do it, doesn't matter to me. So she'd find me guitar tab for all these Irish songs. And so basically I haven't really put any time or effort into reading music since, like, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade probably? Aside from the occasional trying to dust off that portion of my brain and remembering that only the basics are there still to be dusted off. But that was the last instrument I, like, played. At one point I could play a couple of entire songs. Not very quickly or very smoothly, but I could play them. The whole thing, all the way through. And that was high school. Which is why I say no, I don't play I don't play a musical instrument. I feel like I kind of answered the what would you love to learn. But honestly, like, having long ago made my peace, I guess, the fact that I'm just not built to play the fiddle, ever. I wouldn't mind taking up either guitar or piano again someday, at some point. And I have the time and energy. Good teaching approach, definitely relating student-centered teaching. Yeah, for sure. I feel like guitar, like, applicable to modern life guitar, you don't need to read music. Like, maybe you just understand. Well, yeah, and you're probably thinking more of, I forget what it's actually called, but it's like what was originally the jazz style guitar or the country style guitar, where you're playing notes on the fretboard, but then you're basically just strumming. Classical, you're fingering notes on the fretboard with your left hand, but then you're individually picking with all 5 fingers on the right. So you are literally doing up to 10 things at a time. The super intense part, which I feel like part of the reason I stopped, my teacher ended up going back to her day job because of like her husband's health issues or something. And I seem to remember us having a hard time finding a teacher who even taught classical anywhere within driving distance. Like, there were not very many of them, if I remember correctly. As for guitar, yes, but they always, in terms of like musical notation, they were always even more basic than what I once knew of sheet music, because basically I took the sheet music that I remembered 6 years after the fact, converted it to tab, and that's about as much tab as I know. But it's like the amount of sheet music I could once read minus 6 years of dust. If that makes sense. Maybe not quite 6. Pretty close though. Oh my gosh, I don't know how it's done for any other instrument, especially not like, I don't know if they have vocal tab. I have no idea how that would work. For guitar, it's stupid easy though. For guitar, it's literally, if you take a piece of paper that has the musical bars written on it in tab, and you turn it 90 degrees, that's your fretboard. With the originally vertical, now horizontal lines marking off, like, obviously progression of time, so now it's top to bottom instead of left to right. But left to right is your fretboard. And the number of the tab is the finger you're supposed to play with. So if it's a 1 on the string that lines up with the E string, then you play a 1 on an E. And that's how you know which, because the weird thing on guitar is that there are multiple ways to play the same notes. Like, you can play the same E in one place on one string, then in a different place on the next string, and then in a further down place on the next string until you run out of fretboard, basically. I haven't heard of instrument-specific music notation other than guitar tabs. I think because it's a solo instrument outside of the classical orchestra. That would make sense. Could also just be because somebody looked at sheet music and said, you know what, that looks kind of like a fretboard. How about we just make it that way? It's very logical. I love it. I'm sorry, fret number, not finger number. Finger number is whatever you can reach it most easily with. So you turn it vertically and like, let's say low E. So when you're holding it right-handed, the top string, which would be the line of F on a treble clef. Wouldn't actually be an F in guitar tab, it'd be a low E, because you turn it vertical. If it says like 3, then you're playing the 3rd fret down with whatever finger you can reach it on. It's been a while since I've seen it. So right, yeah, the fret number and stands for, I think. Yeah, exactly. I always enjoyed guitar tab for that reason. Okay, so let's see. My apologies to anybody who is not at all interested in the musical conversation. It was kind of going with the flow, honestly. Other questions that we got though, because I meant it when I said that I promise everybody will get their questions answered. Alien Storm 7 had one very philosophical question, which I appreciated a lot. If you clean a vacuum cleaner, does that make you the vacuum cleaner? My answer is, I think yes. Either that, or it makes you the vacuum cleaner, which I suppose you could also shorten to be the vacuum cleaner squared. Either way, or possibly both apply. There you go. I have no idea if that answer makes sense. Take it as you will. I did not plan out an easy way to check these off as I went through. Okay, so then I have some questions about games specifically. Monkey says, it's literally just about to say, vacuum cleaner square. Yep. I rather enjoyed that question. Son wanted to know if I'd ever play through the Mass Effect trilogy. Sure. Eventually, absolutely. From what I've heard, well, I know it was made by BioWare, and from what I've heard, it's got enough similarities to Dragon Age that it would definitely be something I'd be interested in trying. Do I know when? Nope. Basically, I may or may not add in another game whenever I get moved into my new place and back on my PC where I can actually stream more or less whatever. And by PC I mean my desktop PC. Where I can actually stream most of the games that I own instead of almost none of them. I'm not sure if I'll actually... I'll probably go back to at least occasional streams of some of the stuff we were streaming before, enjoying like Pathfinder, Kingmaker. I still want to finish After Party on stream eventually because Sleepy too. Same wavelengths. Absolutely. My brain just farted. What was I saying? What was I saying? Wow. Oh, right. So, I'll probably go back to sprinkling in a few non-Dragon Age streams of stuff we were streaming before I moved and got stuck in this laptop limbo for months on end. But I hadn't really, put much thought into whether I'd try and add another, hardcore RPG. I say hardcore RPG, by which I mean, a story-intense one. As opposed to Pathfinder, where there is a story, but it's more equal parts story and strategy, or maybe slightly heavier on strategy, versus Dragon Age, where it's super heavy story, and then it's as much strategy as you kind of want to put into it, right? I hadn't really considered whether I'd try and add in another story-intense sort of game before I actually finished the full Dragon Age series, as it currently stands. Didn't have any particular plans to, just because I'm enjoying Dragon Age so much that I'm totally cool with just streaming mostly Dragon Age until we're done with it. But I'm definitely going to be thinking about next game series and stuff like that, especially as we start getting into Steam summer sales and things like that, whether we're ready for them or not. I'm somehow doubt that, at least at the pace we've been going, that the rest of Dragon Age will last me until the Steam winter sale. Somehow I have a feeling we will be done with the series well before then, at the rate we're currently going. So I'll be kind of looking ahead to that, the next big sale that Steam has, and planning ahead. Probably, Mass Effect is definitely in the cards for eventually. I've heard enough about it and enough people say that it's comparably good to a lot of the things that I like most about Dragon Age, that I'm absolutely interested in trying it. I don't know whether that'll be the next series, just because I'm also looking at some other stuff like Divinity Original Sin 2, I do kind of want to play through Horizon Zero Dawn at some point. Just, you know, other stuff. But it might also be because I might just be like, I need something that's going to be kind of like this. Because if I don't go from one BioWare game to another sort of similar story-based BioWare game, then whatever I play next is going to be a default disappointment. Because I kind of get like that with book series sometimes too, where it'll be like, I'll read the same author for an extended period because the first thing I read by them was so good that I know whatever I read next, if it's too different, then it's going to be a disappointment by default, even if I know logically that's not fair. If that makes sense. So I also wanted to know if I'm excited for any particular upcoming games. Not sure whether he meant like upcoming for me or upcoming releases. I kind of just threw out the games that I have floating around in my head for potential upcoming future ones for me. So as far as upcoming releases, there's really one that I've heard of that's not actually already out. Which I think is coming out in October. But it's an RPG called Forspoken. It's about this like New York girl who gets somehow like thrown through she's a New York City girl, just like paying the bills and shit. And she somehow gets pulled through this portal into basically fantasy realm, and she has this sentient like metal bracelet that like talks to her and is a bit of a smartass, and she has magic powers in this place, and she has to figure out how to get home. Except that, of course, there's also the question of, does she want to go home because here she has magic powers, and you know, she has to defeat these rulers who used to be good, and typical, you know, fantasy adventure hero stuff. But the premise looked interesting, and it was tagged in addition to all the tags that I normally like, such as, you know, RPG, open world. I think it was tagged Choices Matter. I definitely got the impression that choices probably mattered. And having pretty awesome looking graphics. It was also tagged as, specifically had the parkour tag, which I thought was really cool. The game trailer also has some really neat looking parkour in it. And I'm like, a fantasy RPG that's open world that lets me like run around the world and be like super badass parkour chick? Hell yeah. Absolutely, I want in on this. That being said, it comes out in October, and the pre-order is like, I think it was $79.99, so $80 US, which actually makes it even more expensive than Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous or Baldur's Gate 3, at least as far as I know of Baldur's Gate 3. Which basically means it'll probably be several years before I can afford it on sale, even, unless I end up with a really nicely paying job between now and then. So I probably won't be able to afford to play it actually in October or maybe even December, like, if it goes on sale, which usually the sales right after release are pretty lame. Like, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous came out in September, and it still has, like, comparative to how Steam sales usually go, it has the lousiest, still having the lousiest sales, like 25% off when everything else is 60 to 90% off, and it's 20% off of, like, $50 or $60, I think? Like, come on, dude. No. I'll wait a couple of years, that's fine. Whatever. I'll blink and it'll be over anyway. If you like parkour in games, you might like Mirror's Edge. I haven't actually really tried. I'm not sure I've ever played a game that was actually, like, parkour heavy. Certainly not in that third person but immersive sort of RPG sense. I think the closest I've ever gotten was Portal, and that's not really the same because any, like, tumbling or rolling or whatever you do is done automatically. You're literally just moving forwards and backwards. It's not really so much parkour as it is just fancied up running, or fancied up walking, I guess. But I always thought it looked really neat. Like watching gameplay of Horizon Zero Dawn too. I thought that about there's a lot of really neat, just sort of casual, no big deal type parkour in that one that I really wish I could do in real life. Like, holy shit, dude. But I'd certainly be curious to learn more about Mirror's Edge. I guess my point was just that I haven't played enough parkour to know if I like it enough to, like, seek out parkour specific games. Right now it's sort of a bonus that it's like oh yeah, I wanted to try this in a really cool game at some point, you know. But I'm always interested to learn about new games. Mirror's Edge, I'm not sure if I've heard of that one or not. Alien Storm wanted to know if there were any games in particular I was fond of. I found out that I'd want to share with you guys via streaming them. Aside from the ones that I already have and will, I swear, get back to eventually once I have a desktop again. Pathfinder, mostly, actually, is Pathfinder, Valheim. Started playing it after I started streaming, which I cannot say for most games, but maybe Mountain. I might try streaming Mountain Blade Warband at some point. Mount and Blade. It always comes out to me sounding like Mountain Blade. I quite enjoyed Mount and Blade Warband. I haven't played it in quite a few years, but it's one of those tactical top-down, you build your civilization and you either make deals or war with your neighbor countries sort of thing. Not quite as game board-esque as like Sid Meier's Civilization. Definitely more immersive than that, but still from a top-down standpoint, if that makes sense. But I got pretty addicted to that for a while. I don't know how it would work out on stream, but I mean, I might be down to try it at some point if that's something people would be interested in. The other thing was, there's this MMO RPG that I've gone back to a couple of times and was super obsessed with for a while, called Riders of Icarus, which seems to be fairly little known. Like, most people I talk to have never even remotely heard of it, but I quite enjoyed it. It had some story, kind of low-key, but it also had like non-battle related stuff to do and like goals in the game, if that makes sense. Like, you have this whole bestiary of things that you can tame, that's the riders part, and each like chapter or act is this whole different area, and they actually do a really good job, especially after the first like after like part 3, I guess. They start to get really varied in terms of what the actual environment's like. Like, you can go from, you know, meadows and rolling hills and fields and stuff, where you're battling, you know, one type of opponent, to, or like your threats are, you have one set of threats, and then the next area will be like this very fantasy sort of fairy marsh with like glowing trees and like purple sparkly water and just intensely fantasy, but really, really gorgeous, and a whole new set of opponents and quest goals and things. And then you move on to like a place where it's almost like you're in freaking outer space. And you're sort of flying around in this void with like these big floating land masses, but the whole void is dark, like you're in outer space, flying from like moon to moon. And of course a whole bunch of flying mounts, because right, you're in a void of floating islands. You don't last too terribly long in terms of attention span if you have to wait for a ride every time. And that was basically as far as I got. I forget how many areas in it was, but lots of variety. And always kind of surprised me that it was as little known as it was, considering how enjoyable I found it. Like, just graphics were good. I played most of, I want to say 5 areas completely solo. Now, it wasn't easy, but I was able to do it, which I like. I mean, maybe that's a downside for some people, but I'm an introvert. I don't have to go like communicate with random gamer strangers on some MMO just in order to get to the next part of my goal. If I want to play with friends, I'll play with friends, but don't force me to do it to progress the story. That's how I start putting off quests and then never finishing the story. But it's been a while. I've actually played through the first couple of areas a couple of times, because I went back and redid it with another friend of mine a couple years later. And then they changed like management or something, and they weren't actually using the Steam launcher anymore. And then they were using Nexon, and I want to say they either got bought out from Nexon or the Nexon launcher stopped being supported or something like that. But it was like the way you got into the game changed enough times, eventually turning into like an account migration that for me never quite went through right. And I just kind of ran out of energy to try and fix. When, of course, you know, gaming company customer service, no matter what game it is, I feel like it's just not helpful. So I ran out of energy to fuck with it. But I'm pretty sure I have to start a new account. But I haven't played since then because of that. I couldn't get into my old account. Didn't have the energy to fuck with trying to get access to my old account. At this point, it's been several years, so I'm pretty sure I'm never getting that account back, which is really a shame. But that's okay. Because it's also been long enough that I would no longer be totally bored by starting it over again. So yeah, I might do that someday. People are interested in it. And these are also wanting to know, and this, I think this is the last of the questions that I should probably, hold on. Before I get into this, 1 second. I'm going to throw a poll up and see what you guys want to do next. And like before, I'm going to make it a 10-minute poll so that if people are chilling, lurking, hanging out, whatever, you've got a few minutes to get in there. Just give me just a minute. Oops, not what I meant to click. That would be your results. I need new poll. I really wish it would let you rerun the same poll again with the click of a button. That would be very useful. looks like a spell. All right. Okay. Set for 10 minutes. Poll is up. Hey, Stone Wheezy. How's it going? Welcome in. Fell asleep watching Purple stream. This is what you wake to. Oh, yes. Yes, fun, chaos, and mess. I hope I didn't wake you up with weird stream noises or anything. We haven't really been doing anything super crazy the past little bit. Good MMO game to play on PC? I guess that kind of depends on what you like in an MMO. Right, because it's sort of relative. Some people are more into certain aspects than others. And I have very limited experience. I played RuneScape for like 6 months back in like middle school, which was over a decade ago. Actually, it was like 17 years ago. Do you like puzzle games? Some. Also, welcome. Saito Architect? Is that... I assume that's how the C is pronounced. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. And also, is Saito okay? Because I shorten everybody's names and I don't always remember to ask first. But I always try to remember to ask first. Sometimes I really like puzzle games. Sometimes my brain feels too tired for them. Nailed it. Awesome. Biggest triumph of the night, I feel like. Anybody who tells you that pronouncing the usernames of people that you've never talked to in chat before out loud on stream with a whole bunch of other people listening, anybody who tells you that that's not one of the hardest parts of streaming doesn't know what they're talking about. On Steam, Challenge is a free puzzle game. Why does that sound familiar? It sounds familiar. Hold on. Let me see. I will stop the wrong screen. Wait a second. No, it's not. Hold on. I actually did want that, just not that. There we go. Chips challenge. That way you guys can see what I'm doing too. Before can join the Bitbusters Computer Club, hang out with the girl of his dreams, Melinda the mental marvel. This is cute, I like it. You must solve all 144 challenging puzzles. Whew. I hope that girl's worth it. Old Windows 95 game. bundle game originally on Atari Lynx. Neat. Right there, you can help Chip rush through the puzzles and mazes before he's deleted by monsters trapped in the passage of time. Interesting. That guy looks familiar. Where does that guy look familiar? Is he an actor? Have I seen him in something? That's awesome. What is this? What? Okay, I'm sorry. I have to know what this progress bar 95 with the glitchy Windows graphics looks like. Played MapleStory for a bit. Something like that. Progress bar 95 is a unique indie game with a strong nostalgic vibe. I mean, it has Clippy. What's not to be nostalgic about? With Dynamite. Turns vintage GUI elements like panels, buttons, and icons into game elements. Simple and addictive gameplay based on dozens of minigames and puzzles. So it sounds like it's basically memeing the shit out of Windows 95, but in a funny, oh my god, that's right, that used to do that sort of way. It's sort of the vibe I'm getting here. Hyper casual UI game. Powerful system of upgrades. I'm sorry, that's just not. The word powerful is not something like. When I think powerful, Windows 95 is not what comes to mind. Not gonna lie. Don't get me wrong. Windows 95 is the earliest operating system that I have memory of, and I was only 3 when it came out. But nostalgia and belief in its power are not the same thing. Top reviewer. If you ever deinstalled is not a word, ladies and gentlemen. The word is uninstalled. The funny thing is, if you try hard enough, it almost makes sense as a separate concept to deinstall an operating system. Almost. Not quite. You have to do some mental gymnastics with it. Invisible disability types. So, I have a genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Basically, obviously pretty invisible. I look just like an average 20-something. But, it's basically like, oh, yeah, you don't have to read it if you don't want to. It's literally just there for... It's there for the sorts of bookworms who tend to want to go snooping for more information, because I don't mind sharing the more information, but I stuck it at the bottom because I'm aware that most people would prefer just to know the basics and then show up on stream and get to know me that way. I'm fine with that too. But as the curious sort myself, you know, the types of people who look up random people from middle school whose names they happen to remember on Facebook like 20 years after the fact, just out of curiosity to see what they're up to. Or, you know, the innocently nosy but curious people. That's why I stuck that there, was for those people, basically. Because I figured those were the people who'd be like, I don't care if you give me a whole bunch of paragraphs, I want to snoop more, I want to know more, I want, you know, questions answered, whatever. And then at the bottom so that nobody else had to look at it. Innocently nosy. I mean, that's basically what it is, right? It's not like maliciously nosy. It's not like, let me prod and pry into your business so I can go and gossip about it to somebody else. It's just like, honestly curious about people and learning more about, yeah. Pretty descriptive, right? Super accurate, yeah. But that's why that's there. So basically, if you don't feel like reading the whole thing, it's essentially dysfunction in the way your body forms, well, certain types of collagen. It gets down into like individual genes and individual breakdowns of collagen, and it's all very complicated, and I don't understand most of the like super detail. Basically, when you start talking in letters and numbers and subvariants, I tune out and I'm like, okay, can you give me the TLDR or turn them into imaginary characters and tell me how they relate to each other that way? But basically it's the body produces collagen that's defective, which affects connective tissue, and depending on which variant of it you have, and I think it's 13, which tend to all but one of them, they know the specific gene for it, so they can actually test for a specific subvariant, and whichever subvariant you have kind of determines the areas of the body that are more or less affected. So like, I'm gonna have a hard time thinking of specifics now, of course. I always get classical and hypermobile mixed up because in my mind, hypermobile sort of is classical, but it tends to be, I mean, it's not classical, they're different things. Hypermobile is the only one that they don't know the gene for, which means it's the only one they can't get a solid yes or no on testing. It's also, of course, the most common, because that's just how things work, right? But that one tends to be very joint heavy. So lots of joint pain, lots of accidental dislocations, more or less double jointed everywhere. If I remember correctly, there are actually some variants that tend to be more double jointed, but also have less actual joint pain, if that makes sense. Anyway, so that would be like a lot of tendon, ligament, joint related connective tissue versus like the only other one that comes to mind off the top of my head is like the most severe, which is the vascular type, where it actually tends to be pretty symptom free usually until you have some major crisis like a heart attack in your 20s, or like an organ rupture out of nowhere for no apparent reason, and then they find it because of that. But that tends to affect more like what's the word I'm looking for? Basically stuff like organ ruptures, internal like bleeding, or aortic like heart malfunctioning stuff, vascular, so blood vessel system in general, right, tends to be more affected. Sometimes with other symptoms, sometimes without. Same friggin' genetic condition, go figure, two totally different things. Anyway, so depending on which variant you have, affects the gene, which affects the type of collagen, and then the collagen is basically what makes connective tissue strong. So over time, as your body produces more of this defective collagen, your connective tissue gets slowly weaker, as I understand it. Now, it's worth throwing a grain of salt out there that I'm actually currently in the process of trying to get an appointment with an actual like specialist. So like I haven't actually had the genetic like subvariant testing yet. I mean, it's been a damn long time coming, but it's one of those things where you kind of have to get somebody who knows their shit about the subject to tell the insurance company, no, fuck you, before the insurance company will pay for something like genetic testing. Um, so I haven't gotten to talk to like somebody who actually specializes in EDS yet. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I have done a whole lot of my own sort of research, so I'm not making shit up, but I have not double-checked this with my own personal doctor. Or at least not with a personal doctor who specializes in. But anyway, as I understand it, as your body produces more of this defective collagen and it starts getting, becoming more and more a part of your connective tissue starts getting weaker and weaker because it's got this, the collagen that's supposed to strengthen it that's coming in, and gradually the amount of collagen, I guess, is being replaced over time with this defectively created collagen or whatever. So very gradually over time, the connective tissue gets weaker and weaker, so you start having more problems. And some of them are like, the symptoms tend to be so absurdly varied, sometimes even within the same variant. But then you take into account the fact that there are 13 variants and at least 12 different genes involved in all of them. Like, kind of one of those things is sort of a catch-all phrase where if people knew what it meant, just saying I have EDS wouldn't actually tell people much of anything about your health situation necessarily. But nobody knows what it is anyway, so you still have to kind of I can still do that party trick. I'll be 30 in June. I can still do that party trick where you clasp your hands and you can bring them all the way around behind your head and back over without ever letting go. Usually people lose the ability to do that when they hit like puberty. I never have. I can still all the way around. I am double jointed everywhere. But it's actually a little bit I feel like there was something recently actually where I stumbled across an unexpected advantage to that. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what that was. It's not so much that, I mean, party tricks aside, and to be fair, party tricks are a thing. But party tricks aside, it's not really that there's any advantages to it. Specifically, it's more like some people have bigger disadvantages with it than others, if that makes sense. Like, for some people, it's legitimately only ever a fun party trick that they can do forever, and like it never really causes any extra pain or anything like that. Other people have lots of chronic pain, or you know, I don't know, organ replacements or whatever the case may be. I don't think I had yet to hear of any, like, yeah, I've never heard anybody mention anything that's like specifically a plus. Fortunately, that's sort of the thing with medical, like physical medical stuff, right? Like, at least with mental health stuff, it's like a lot of times you get something for what you're paying for in pain. If that makes sense. Like, whatever it is that is the struggle that tortures the shit out of you, usually there is some legitimate upside that you lose if you get rid of the misery, then you lose whatever that hidden bonus is too, right? Like, if anybody's seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, good example. Schizophrenic guy, absolute math genius, wasn't it? I think it was math. Loses a lot of the passion and sharpness and genius that kind of makes him who he is when he loses the paranoia and the voices and stuff. So it's sort of like striking that middle ground. Not really like that with physical, like, medical stuff in general. Usually, it's pretty rare for it to come with upsides. Unfortunately. It's more like a... You can make stuff up, I guess. Like, I joke about party tricks. There are totally people who would do that as like a... almost like a toxic positivity sort of thing, where it's like, all you have to do is say one thing the right way, and they're perfectly happy to, like, launch into full-on woe is me bitch session. Behind all that, like, forced smile, brave face, oh, the party tricks, like, you know, whatever. I don't mean to make fun of anybody, I really don't. Like, everybody deals with struggle in their own way. That being said, people who, like, bait for sympathy and pretend that they're not baiting for sympathy have always frustrated me. I don't do it as that. I do it because I legitimately get delight out of the fact that I can stand next to a 12-year-old and do something that usually adult joints are not meant to do. I can do it without causing any lasting harm to myself. It's fucking weird looking. And who cares? Like, you know. Oh. Thank you. I don't think you ever told me whether it was Unitas or Unitas. I think I pronounce your name differently every single time I see you. But thank you for the stretch redemption. I needed that. Ugh. It was about time. You gave up trying. Oh. Either one were. I can only imagine how many different ways you've heard that pronounced. Because that was just the, like, go-to presumed American pronunciations. I guess Unidos would be the more Spanish type pronunciation, something like unite us, like that, like unite us except with a D and run together, sort of. Gotcha. Oh. I saw an I. I thought it was supposed to be not. Unitas. Gotcha. Yes? Yes, Unitas. Emphasis on the U. Got it. Committed to memory. I will attempt not to fuck it up again. How are you doing this evening? Or this morning? Welcome in. You're talking about my party trick. It's not like I can, I don't know, stick a bone up out of my skin or something weird like that. I just super flexy, just not in the muscles. Trying to think of a way to explain it when I stream. Think you found one. Cool. I completely forgot I had a poll running. I mean, the poll went away and didn't remind me. I wish there was some sort of, I wish I could put some sort of like little chime or bell or something on it when it ends to remind me that it's ended, because I kind of lose track of time. Let's see. What do you guys want? What you people want? Words on stream is what two of you unanimously want. So, words on stream, I believe, is where we are going. That being said, I have quite enjoyed our community games night. And if I can figure out a time when I can stream and there are like reliably enough people around to actually play the game. Like, we didn't get to play Mutter Nonsense tonight. I don't expect, well, I don't know, we might. People might show up. I have had the occasional weird Sunday night stream where it'll be like peak viewers at 4:30 a.m. or something weird like that, but barring more people waking up and joining us in chat, we probably won't get to play Mutter Nonsense tonight because it needs at least at least 3 people. I've got another one that requires at least 4. I think it's at least 3. It's either a minimum of 3 or minimum of 4. To be like present and interacting in the game and stuff. But if I can find a time during the week when I can stream and other people are consistently around, I have actually thought about adding a second, like, consistent weekly stream to my schedule. Right now I only have the one that's Minecraft Mondays. But I had thought about adding another one that was a little bit shorter, but like a community game night. You like unit and does like dust. Makes sense. Unit might not work. Yeah. Probably depends on whether they read it as the word unit or as like the first part of the pronunciation. If they read it as just the first part of the pronunciation, it could go either way, for sure. It depends on how, yeah. And I feel like N-E-E is the more common phonetic way to spell out the ni, or N-I-H for ni. Like, I don't know, without any other something to suggest or guide me one way or the other. If I see just an I kind of assume that I'm supposed to pronounce the I as like the letter I, like nigh or ni, like knit. Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay. I got the name from the old CB radios. Oh, nice. Just had to change my bard. My warrior was Uniden. Here it is. I like it. I like it. Old school tech. I'm a fan. Not specifically of old school tech, but of the reference at least. That's fun. That's pretty cool. I was doing something on this page specifically. What was it? Oh, I was changing, or getting ready to change. Oh, damn it. Put the poll up before I asked the last question I had on my pre-ask sheet, so that the poll could be running while I answered that. And then we got sidetracked, and because I did say I was going to prioritize questions that popped up in chat. Got sidetracked, forgot I hadn't actually answered this one yet. Poll is long over. I'm just like, sorry guys. The last question was from Alien Storm, asking about what types of characters I prefer, like comedic ones, anti-heroes, or more traditional heroes, and why. Didn't specify whether they meant like characters to play, like in an RPG, or in general, like as NPCs or book characters or whatever, just favorite characters in general. In terms of prefer to play, a lot of times in terms of like RPGs and stuff, I tend to either go with like, well, and again, because my brain overthinks things and over analyzes details and shit, which most of you should probably know about me by now. It's like, okay, but then are we talking about from a mechanical standpoint or a roleplay standpoint? Because preference or like tend to default toward what's easiest in terms of like a roleplay character to play from a personality standpoint. Very much the good-hearted, legit hero, but also pretty sarcastic and doesn't mind being a little sassy or a little bit salty about it sometimes. Basically me, except bolder and arguably significantly more confrontational because I'm like anti-confrontational. Me, but extra. More or less. In terms of like what kinds of characters, and if it's talking about preferences to play, like in terms of character styles, I very much tend toward sneaky silver-tongued rogues. I never really the tanks or the damage sponges or the straight up like DPS style warriors. That's always been like, if I play those, it's a very intentional choice to try and do something different and not something very different from what I would normally do, basically, is how I tend to end up playing those characters. My comfortable, happy place in terms of types of characters tends to be some combination of magic and rogue-like, or like rogue-style combat. Usually with at least a bit of stealth to fall back on in an emergency. And usually with a solidly decent and frequently underused ability to talk myself out of all sorts of shit. One of the things I love about Dragon Age is that I don't feel like the skill points I put into coercion were a waste at all. Like, I feel like I actually get a chance to use those skills, which I really appreciate in the game. Especially in RPG where choices matter, because unless I'm making an explicit effort not to, or to play a character different than who I am, if choices matter, I'm almost always gonna go with the fast talk my way out of it over the fuck it, let's fight method. If that makes sense. So I love when the game actually, like, when choices matter and the game gives me the option to do it the way that I would want to do it. Makes it sound way more like a simple, basic thing than I feel like it actually is. But in general, as far as like NPCs, book characters go, I think the types of characters I prefer, just kind of the more interesting, the better. It's one of the reasons I never took quite so much to win in the Origins base game was because, I know there are people who really, really like win. In my defense, we did the Circle Tower next to last. I barely got to know her like at all before we got to all the end stuff. That being said, from going through the Circle Tower quests and stuff with her, like, she just seemed kind of bland and uninteresting, and there were far more interesting companions that I wanted to, like, quest with and hang around and listen to their dialogue and stuff way more. So I guess in terms of general characters to interact with, I would just say interesting ones. Okay, so that brings me, I think, to the end of my list, maybe? We covered sandwiches. Oh, no, I missed one. Sorry, Sleepy. Favorite canned food? No idea. I don't really eat that much. Like, I assume you mean just like classic canned food. That you get on like the canned aisle or whatever. I guess maybe sweet corn or possibly lima beans. Those are the first two things that come to mind. It's something that I know comes in the can that sounds particularly tasty. There you go. I actually rather like, I hesitate to say I like sardines because most of the time I actually don't. But I like the skinless, boneless ones that come in olive oil.